Oh, I guess I better hit get it. There we go. We're live. Welcome to the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate tonight. This is our 40th class tonight. Jim Riley, myself, Phil Svoboda have been bringing this to you. We've been doing this together. This is 40 times together, and that's a pretty incredible accomplishment considering Jim and I sat down over coffee one day and had a vision of how we could move the dial, especially for our young people, our younger thinking people, how we could just give someone some leverage. So this is the fulcrum, and that's how I want to look at this call tonight. This is the fulcrum. Everything else that you do is going to pile up on that. So this will give you that leverage to lift yourself up one notch higher. And we've done 40 of these, so hopefully we've ratcheted it up 40 degrees, right? We can go to 45 and then we can start moving it up from there. So I'm pretty excited, and it's a huge accomplishment. So again, my hat off to my partner, Jim. Appreciate your effort and input so much, and our shared vision. So what we did was we sat down, and it was my task to write out a curriculum, right? So we've got 2 years. What would be important? What conversation topics would be important to help move the dial? What topics could we address based on our experience, of which we have a lot, just because we're old, right? We have a bunch of stuff we want to share with everybody, and tonight, it's a grab bag. It's kind of like those mystery bags where you open it up and it's like, oh, this is what I get to talk about this week. But it falls in line, and you don't know what you're going to get. We do know what we're going to get, but we don't look at it ahead of time because we're busy folks, right? Productive people. So I looked at mine last week, and the topic was empathy. And I thought, oh, dear Lord, please, why me? Why can't Jim do this one? Why can't Rachel do this one? I don't want to talk about empathy. But it was a topic that needed to be discussed. And just a few minutes ago, I thought, what is it about this topic, right? Well, this is what it is. To be better in business, right? To be better in business, we need to be better. We need to be better people. And we get that way by practicing and embracing empathy. And I'm going to go into that in great detail, but I'm gonna ratchet it down. So it's going to be in bite-sized chunks tonight. But I did not want to do this because, quite honestly, in my family background, and I've alluded to this before, my family didn't practice empathy. My mother was a nurse, a surgical nurse in a small town hospital. So everybody who died, she had her hands in that. She knew about that. If there was a tragedy, a child got run over, there was an industrial farm accident, somebody got bit by a snake and died, somebody drowned, my mom knew about it. She was there hands on. So she just kind of had this stoic, everything was compressed and it didn't come out. We could talk about anything at the dinner table. And that's kind of how, we'd say, hey, we saw the ambulance go by today. What was it? Well, so-and-so, died. This is what happened. And it was just stoic. It was just facts, nothing but the facts, right? But there was no emotion. My mother shut off her emotions, and she was so good at it that we didn't get any emotional connection. And my father was, my mother, to be fair, was one of 12 children. And it wasn't a good scenario when she grew up. So she didn't have any nurturing parents in her life, didn't have a lot of nurturing from anybody really. So she was a product of what she learned. My father was one of 15 children. So you can imagine what I came from. There wasn't, it's like, go do your chores and we'll feed you if there's enough food left over. And I don't mean to make it sound like it was that bad. My parents loved me in their own way, but there wasn't any feeling. There wasn't any attachment to that. And I'm not telling you that to, put a guilt trip on my parents. I'm just simply saying that we are all, every one of us are a product of our environment. We are a product of what we've been through. We are a product of what we've learned from those relationships. And like it or not, we carry that with us until we're able to shed it like a snake can shed its skin, right? And if we're healthy, that's what we'll do. We'll shed what's not necessary and we'll evolve, molt, and move on to the next step. And I think that's what I've done. There were things that I missed in my life. And so I did things differently with my family. And I did it intentionally. And I adopted, because I was changing, I had to change those attitudes and everything else. Not only did I change it for myself and my family, I was able to change it in my business relationships. It was a total metamorphosis. So it wasn't just changing for my family, it was changing me, right? And so that carried over into everything. So before I get started, I'm gonna send out homework right now. And that is this. I want everyone to send out on the group text when we're done with this call, or an email if you like, if you don't want to share with everyone else, or just text Jim or myself, one thing, one takeaway from this call tonight. What's one thing that resonated with you, and send that back to Jim and myself, okay? That's my task, and I'll bring this up at the end too. So first, we're going to talk about empathy. What is empathy? Well, empathy is a noun. I went to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. It is this: the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. That's it. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy is the doorway to building relationships. Empathy is that doorway. This is what empathy is not. Empathy is not sympathy, it is not compassion, and it is not pity. The definition for those are this: sympathy are feelings of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Compassion is the sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. And pity is the feeling of sorrow and compassion caused by the suffering and misfortunes of others. So the three things that those have in common, sympathy, compassion, and pity, are negative things that other people are going through. Empathy is the ability, right, to understand and share the feelings of another, whether it's negative or positive. All right, this is a very, very important distinction, and you're going to see why as we move through this. Empathy is about sharing the good and the bad. It is easy for us, I think, to share the bad because we've all suffered and we all want to be compassionate, right? And so we can step in and, we usually think of this in times of sorrow, if somebody's had a loss or, a pet dies, whatever it happens to be, it's easy to step up and say, oh, man, I'm so sorry. Oh, a business deal went south. Oh, I totally understand, man, you're going through it right now. I get it. Let's go have a beer. It's easy to find that common ground in the negative. It's not so easy to find it in the positive. All right. And those are the opportunities that we as entrepreneurs, as business people, need to look for, because we operate on a different plane. We don't operate on that negative. We operate on a plane of positivity, and we're moving up. We are always on the trajectory of upward mobility. We're not going to stay here at status quo. We're not going to get down in the dumps. It is our responsibility to take this to the next level, whatever this happens to be. All right. So I mentioned to Jim earlier, well, maybe it was last week, I said, I woke up in the middle of the night and I wrote something down. I wrote a couple of things down on a notebook. One of them was this. It said, it's smart to learn from our mistakes. It's smarter to learn from other people's mistakes. Right? So Jim has said, he paid the dummy tax. Well, this is it. If you're smart, you're going to learn from your mistakes. That's easy. Don't touch the hot stove. It's smarter to learn from our mistakes, right? We're telling you, don't touch the hot stove. We're telling you, practice empathy to get to that next level. Now, here's the number one. I broke this down into just two simple things. I've done some research. There are points, like 6 different points with empathy. I broke it down to 2 to make this really, really easy. And this is coming from my background, right? Number 1, those of you, please take notes. All right. Number 1, no comparing. Empathy is not about comparing your story to somebody else's, especially with the negative. The last thing somebody wants to hear when they've lost, a loved one is, oh, I know what you're going through. I lost my brother, I lost my mother, I lost my father. They don't want your story, right? This is about them. So no comparing. Keep yourself out of it. You don't belong in that conversation except in a listening ear. And if they want your help, they can ask for it, but don't compare. As I mentioned, my family, there wasn't a lot of nurturing. I'll put it that way to put it nicely, right? But what my family was, and this is like Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My parents were the lower middle class, hardworking, great people, great hearts. But I'll tell you what, if somebody else had success, they were the first ones to, throw stones at them. Oh, well, they got the lucky break. Oh, well, they didn't deserve that. Or, oh, she knew this person. And they always had a reason that somebody else had success. They always compared their situation to somebody else. Rather than look at somebody else's success and say, wow, they did a great job. They're moving up. They got a promotion. They worked hard for that. Rather than do that, they compared everything to themselves. So the first thing to be empathetic is really get rid of the comparison thing. You cannot be comparing your life, your situation to anybody else's. You can't compare your business to anybody else's. You can't compare your podcast to somebody else's. You can't compare your sales numbers to somebody else's. You can't compare your family life to somebody else's. It's not fair. Okay? It's not fair and it's not relevant. So stop comparing. And I know that's tough. I know hundreds and hundreds of people, and I see it all the time. Comparing is a fatal flaw. So calling it out, exposing it tonight, this is number 1. And I put it first on the list for that reason. And you know that I'm a believer, and I'm not usually a preacher, but I'm gonna use a lesson from the Bible tonight. So I'm taking this liberty, just because whether it was from the Bible or whether it was from a secular book, the point is the same. I want you to learn something from this. So the Apostle John, this is in John, and one of the apostles is saying to Jesus, hey, because Jesus called John out. He said, hey, John, you don't have to deal with this. You're going to do, I've got a different plan for you. You're going to be doing this. He's got 12 disciples. One of them, Jesus has got a special plan for. The other 11 are all like, hey, what's up? One of them is bold enough, at least, to question Jesus. Hey, what is it? And he says to him, what about him? Why him? Why are you letting John off of the hook, right? And Jesus says this to him. He says, if I desire that he stay on earth until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. All right? So the lesson for all of you is it doesn't matter what X, Y, and Z is doing. It doesn't matter what your competitor is doing. You follow you. You follow your values. You follow your business plan. Don't be distracted by this other stuff because you have your own purpose. Yeah, and I'll go right out here. You have a divine purpose, right? If you've got a business startup, if you've got an idea, if you've got something in the back of your brain that's just gnawing on you, you have a purpose. And that was planted there by the divine. I'm telling you right now, fulfill it. Don't compare yourself to other people. And by the way, here's the ending of that story if you don't know it. the apostle John that Jesus singled out. And that's the one, by the way, he said, "You take care of my mother." So he singled John out. "You're going to live because I need someone to take care of my mom." What a great thing, right? Every other disciple that he had met with a martyr's death. Every other one. And only 2 of them are recorded in the Bible, but if you go through historical records, all 11 of them were martyred, except for John. He's the only one who actually had and Jesus called it out. If you look at the actual writing, when it says, "If I desire that he stay until I come," that language is actually, if I desire him to remain alive until I come. So you have a divine purpose here. Your business has a divine role to play somehow, somewhere. That's not between me and you. That's between you and what's in your heart. All right? You have discernment and wisdom and insight that you can't get from Jim and I. We can give you all the tools to rely on what you need to do, but stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop comparing to other businesses. And if you don't, that's great. This is just a reminder to keep it that way. Number 2, and this is the hard part, all right? Be vulnerable. You've heard Jim and I both talk about this a lot, just being authentic. Part of being authentic is being vulnerable, all right? And here's a quote from Maya Angelou. She says, "I think we all have empathy. We may not have the courage to display it." What does she mean by that? We can all be empathetic. We can all actually lean into other people's feelings and share our feelings with them. But it takes courage to do that. We have to be vulnerable. We have to put ourselves out there to be able to be truly empathetic. We have to wear our hearts on our sleeve. That's kind of what I did tonight. I had a good upbringing, but let me tell you what, I had my own emotional suffering. To just share that is vulnerable. It makes me vulnerable. It's not comfortable. That's why I wish Jim was doing this talk tonight, or Rachel, anybody. Being authentic and true engagement requires that we be vulnerable. We have to put ourselves out there. We have to let our children know. We have to let our business partners know. We have to let people that we're dealing with on a regular basis know that we have feelings. We're not just business people. We're not ruthless, cutthroat people. We're human beings. And we can relate to them on a human being level. And I'll tell you what, when we do that, it's going to strengthen our relationships. And that's why this is on the menu today. This will strengthen your relationships, whether it's your family relationship with your spouse, business relationships. It's going to give you a foot up. Anytime you're strengthening a relationship, it's putting you in a more powerful position. Being vulnerable is where growth happens. This is where all relationships are built and strengthened. And it's difficult to be vulnerable. It's a lot easier to avoid all that and simply get into the greeting card Hallmark platitudes, right? "I'm so sorry for your loss. I feel your pain. I know what you're going through. I've been there. I've done that." But to actually engage with someone from a heart level takes more than that. It takes being authentic and speaking from our hearts, right? And I was thinking about this also, grief, because it's easier for us to show compassion and pity and sympathy when it's a grief-related thing. And all of us have had some sort of a loss in our lives, whether it's a pet or a loved one, right? Grief is something we don't get over. And that's something I hear all the time. You'll get over it. You don't get over it. You don't. Grief is something you carry. And it's a lot easier to carry if you've got someone helping you carry the load. And if you're not letting someone know you need help carrying that load, you're going to carry it all by yourself. And it's going to drag you down, and it's going to stop your performance. It's going to hinder your growth. And you've got to be vulnerable enough to let people know You're hurting. I need help. You've got to reach out and ask for help, whether it's business help, whether it's relationship help, whether it's spiritual help. You've got to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm letting you in on a secret. I'm hurting. I'm struggling. And when you do that, people will let you in on their secrets. And you're going to have a stronger relationship, better business relationships. And bottom line is this, you're going to have better outcomes. You will have better outcomes from it. So here was another quote I found on vulnerability. It said, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. And that was somebody, Brene Brown. I don't know who that is, but think about this. What do you want in your business and your personal relationships? I highlighted the big ones: love, joy, courage, creativity, hope, accountability, and authenticity. You don't get any of that without being vulnerable. Okay? Vulnerability, stop comparing. It's going to make you more empathetic. So that's 2. The last thing I'll end with is this. Number 3, find your purpose. You should already have that defined in your business plan, right? What's the purpose of your business? But what's your purpose? What's your personal purpose? Jim and I always work on a personal mission statement. We teach our kids at school, you need a personal mission statement. And then you need a mission statement for your business when you're writing a business plan, okay? Somewhere in there is your purpose. So find your purpose, define your purpose, all right?
Recording in progress.
So this is a John Steinbeck quote. We had to go to some literature here. You can only understand people if you feel them in yourself. That's true empathy. If you want to understand people, if you want to understand your customers, if you want to understand the market, you have to feel them. And you can't feel them if you're putting a wall around yourself, right? If you're living in a shell for protection, you're not going to feel what you need to feel from your customers. What is it you're trying to give them? What need are you trying to fill? What problem are you trying to solve with your business venture? You can't do it unless you feel them. You can't feel them unless you're empathetic, and you can't be empathetic unless you're vulnerable. That's where the authenticity is going to come through. So your purpose will be defined. Your purpose will be magnified by your ability to identify and connect with people on a deeper and emotional level. You will find ways to meet their needs, and you will truly serve them. And that, my friends, is where the money is. That's where the real money is. That's where you're going to find that pot of gold. So again, this was a tough one for me to do. The last thing, that there were 6 bullet points. I was looking up empathy. It says take genuine interest in people, right? That's right out of Carnegie. We know that. Look at things from other people's perspective. Again, get out of yourself. It's not about you. Acknowledge other people's feelings. It's not how you feel, it's about them. Never judge them, never compare, okay? And be supportive. What can you do to help? Be generous with your time and attention. That's what we can do. And if we can do that through our business, we're going to get more value. They're going to get more value from us, and we're going to receive more value from them, from the world. So not something fun for me to deal with, but it was on the agenda. I got it done. So now, by the end of this call tonight, we're going to open this up for questions, comments, anything else you've got going on. But I do want to know, what was your takeaway from tonight? Did you get anything from this? How can you apply it to your business, to your life, your relationship? I promise there's fruit in this. There's good stuff in this. You're just going to have to dig, maybe let it resonate for a little bit. Jim, I'm kicking it over to you.
Well, I was just thinking, good thing that you got this topic because I would have glossed over it and gave people something else. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do something else.
I thought about it. I did think about it.
But you're disciplined. And so here's my takeaway, and I'm not going to text it in there because I'm going to give it to you right now. And I was already going to say this before you gave me the homework. I interviewed two people today for my podcast. One, Thomas Gelmy, he's out of Switzerland. Okay. He's a business coach. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's very successful. And he's on the Forbes company council, how they decide where that company's going for Forbes magazine and everything Forbes, right? Top level guy. And then I also interviewed Mark Stoos, who's with Proof Analytics out of Scottsdale. This guy, top level analytics for companies and talking about the skills that are required to be successful. He's actually written several speeches for the president of the United States. Now, I didn't ask him which one. I didn't want to go down that road. I could probably guess. It wasn't one of my favorites, but doesn't matter. My point of giving you the background on both these gentlemen that I interviewed today is we all talked about what you and I say are soft skills, which would be empathy, right? Thomas actually gave me a new word. He called it an essential skill because these soft skills are so important in business. Without it, you won't succeed. So when we look at empathy and how important that is as it relates to even these top level guys in two different parts of the world operating at that level are talking about the same thing we're talking about here tonight, which is empathy, helping others, being thoughtful in your approach with people, and all these things that we can be doing to make a difference, whether we're serving a customer or we're working with coworkers, our partners, employees, whatever that looks like. Empathy's right up there on the top of the list. I'm looking at everybody that's on the call tonight, and I can give every single person an example of how they can apply empathy to their customers and what they do. I'm hoping they'll give you their own, but it's not one to be overlooked, and it's meant to be applied. And one thing that you did say that resonated with me, and I believe that Mark was talking about it today, is just being vulnerable. Sometimes we have to be vulnerable to help others, right? We might have to say, gosh, let me come down to your level for a minute and feel vulnerable and allow them to utilize, what you're offering in that empathetic moment, right? So it's hard for us to be vulnerable. It's hard for us to get out of our comfort zone. It's hard for us to express feelings, especially in the workplace. And especially if you're in that type of workplace where, you got a bunch of tough guys running around, nobody wants to show empathy, but that's probably where it's needed the most, right? So it's a good topic. You did a great job, Rod. Thanks for sticking with it. Cause like I said, I would have glossed over it. And while he's waiting for questions, if you've got any, don't forget this Q&A time is to ask any question about anything. Don't apologize if it's off topic. Don't worry about if it's off topic. The goal is that through your questions, we can not only help you, hopefully, or go get you an answer and get back to you, but also help everybody in the group that might have the same question. I fielded a few questions over the weekend from some members. I'm happy to do it, by the way, but I thought, gosh, I wish you would have asked on the call so everybody could hear the answer, right? So anyways, Rod, I'll give it back to you, but thanks again.
Thank you. Well, Jim, I can tell you that being vulnerable is not easy, especially if you're leading a company, you're leading a business. And I'll be sexist here for a minute. Being men, we're supposed to be the tough guy. When I grew up, that's what it was. You're not going to be a crybaby. And that's shifting culturally. That is shifting, which I think is a good move. But it's still difficult, especially in the business field where you're supposed to just make business decisions and not emotional decisions. Well, the fact of the matter is, if we're making a good business decision, we should have our emotions engaged in that decision. That should be a part of it, right? If you're going to lay off 500 people, by golly, you better have your emotions attached to that because that's a big decision. That's how you're going to plug in. That's how you're going to make the right decision, by having your emotions attached to it. So it's one of those things where a cultural crossroads in many respects, I think. And we need to get beyond that. We need to figure this out in our own families and in our own businesses to be able to take this to the culture and start shifting the culture. If we're going to be the next business leaders for the next generation or two, we need to get this part figured out.
Well, Rod, just to jump in real quick, thinking about empathy, right? We talk a lot about investors are people that will do business with you. They're doing business with you more for you oftentimes versus just the product, right? Your personality, your ability to be empathetic might win that tie of who they select to work with, right? So again, these skills come into play if you're willing to be vulnerable and really be honest and authentic with people. I see Sam's got her hand up. She's always got a good one.
Sam, go ahead. Unmute yourself and let's hear what you've got to say.
Hi.
Hi.
Please excuse me. I'm getting my first of 2 workouts in for 75 hard. It's going to be a long night. But the call from what I got, sorry, I didn't get on it immediately, but it's been awesome. But I have a question for you as I'm in a situation with a client in a sense where there isn't much empathy. Like the client just doesn't have it in them. So I feel like I'm going in there as an emotional person, trying to show him that he needs to put a little emotion into how he's going about things with other clients, or I'm sorry, with other employees. Because I'm kind of an outsider. It's a new client for me and stuff, but I'm trying to figure out how I help him to be more empathetic towards his employees, because I'm a business owner as well, and I see it and I'm like, oh, this is where he's falling off. Like, this is it. And I can pinpoint it, but with the, tough guy attitude or things like that, sometimes it's hard to, I need some tips on how to maybe push it through to him that maybe he needs to be a little bit more empathetic towards his employees.
Wow, boy, that's a tough one. This is exactly what we were talking about, Sam. And we're in a culture that doesn't value that. And so I don't know what I know you're doing marketing, but I don't know what your actual role is there, because if you're, can you for a quick second? I'm getting a feedback. Thanks. Thank you. So I think that number one is be honest and communicate. We've talked about that before. You have to communicate to him. But if you can appeal to his business side and just say, this makes sense for you and your business to value what your employees are saying and feeling, right? Because ultimately it's going to affect his business. And Jim, I'm going to have you weigh in on that, but there's something I always, I take screenshots of things that I think are going to be relevant, and I'm going to have to find one here. So if you want to respond to that, but I will tell you, Sam, be honest and communicate that to him, but do it from a business perspective, not a personal, emotional one. And then Bruce has got some comments on this too.
Dude, it's Valentine's Day. I don't know if I want to weigh in on this with my with Sam. It's a challenging situation, especially when you're looking at a client that you're working with. You don't want to upset them, but I think Samantha, some of the things that you've spoken about and what you've done with this client have been really, managing up. I use that term, that this could be one of those things that over time you manage up a little bit at a time, right? Like, hey, we lost another employee. What do you think was the deal there? Or just settle approaches with them so that you can chip away at that empathy, topic. But it's tough, because when you have arrogant leaders or tough guy leaders that aren't willing to, shed that outer layer to be honest and authentic, it really is a hard spot to be in. You probably have one of the tougher ones to be in. But over time, with your consistency and you modeling that behavior, then eventually they might catch on. If not, then they will continue to lose. And I know some of the backstory on this, and they could suffer the consequences. So, Bruce, did you have something?
Bruce, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, Jim, and Rod, in answer to your homework assignment. I think the question or the thing is takeaway for me is the term genuineness. One of the problems I've seen in a lot of business folks is it's about the almighty dollar. And that's important. But at the end of the day, I'm not engaging with someone just to make money. I have a service to deliver. I think it's important to be able to deliver that. And by the same token, when I go to a medical professional, my accountant, whoever, and I engage them with a service, I want to know that this is not just a bottom line dollars and cents relationship. I want them to connect with me. And so the ability to be genuine is really important. One of the problems is that we see with that is all too often we are hostage to social rules or mores that say, for example, men can't cry.
Right.
You know, that's a mistake. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying you should turn into a blithering idiot or you should turn into a pile of goo. You know, suck it up, cupcake. You got to drive on and deal with it. But February 27th is coming up. February 27th, 2016, my first partner on a job died of throat cancer. I can't walk through my office past the patch board in my office without seeing Jimmy's patch from his Class A's. There's always a tear in my eye when I do that. And that's okay. People need to be able to do that. I miss Jimmy because of some operational stuff I did. I was not able to attend his funeral. So I took steps to reach out to a friend of mine who lived in the back. He was a New Hampshire state trooper, and reached out to a friend of mine. And I asked him as a favor, would you do me a favor? He's sure. What do you need? I said, I need you to put one of my badge patches that I wore on the job. I need you to put it on Jim's tombstone. And he did. And, you know, whether I get back to Bedford, New Hampshire, I don't know. But asking a friend to give me a hand with that made it easier. So that genuineness is something that I think we all should strive for in our businesses, because at the end of the day, you can be absolutely filthy rich and none of it's going to go in the casket with you. The only thing you can take is a soul full of experiences. So food for thought.
Thanks for that, Bruce. Appreciate it.
So great point, Bruce. Rod, if you don't mind, just real quick, you know, I was thinking about, I didn't watch the Super Bowl. I'm not a big football fan. I was interested in hearing how the national anthem was going to be sung by a country star, which I thought he did a nice job. And for me, that was probably my highlight, again, since I didn't watch the game. But I will guarantee you that one of the highlights of that game, because this is what I've seen on social media the day after, is that coach that shed a tear during that national anthem. My social media is flooded with that image. And what my guarantee is that he showed an emotion as a coach, you know, although that team didn't win, he was at the Super Bowl. What player would not want to play for that coach? He had ability to show empathy, to be honest and authentic with his tears on national worldwide TV at the success rate that he has, right? So it'll be interesting to watch his career and his team and where it goes and how his team members feel about him in the future, because I guarantee you that he, not intentionally, but he bought a lot of credit with people with his emotional outburst at the game. So kudos to him for doing that and being honest and authentic.
Yeah, and I've seen that too, Jim, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So I want to share with the group, just because I did text this to you, Samantha, just because it's relevant for your situation. This is how the thing went on social media. It said, worker quits. Okay, a worker in a business quits. The workers go to the boss and say, are you going to replace him? That position was important. The company says, no. Workers say, is anyone going to get a raise for picking up their work? Company says, no. more workers quit. The company says, damn, everyone's leaving. That's nuts. Right? It's like at some point, people have to get this. They have to understand, or it's going to cost them in human resources, in human personnel. And I know I've done a lot of research on what it costs companies to lose valuable, long-term trained employees. And this is Harvard Business School was the latest study I've looked at. 4.5 times the annual salary, including benefits, is what it costs to lose a worker, to replace them and train a new one. You think about that. If you just put this in a money category and say, if you lose these people who are working for you and they're already experienced, whatever you're paying them now, multiply that by 4.5, because that's what it's costing you. That's what it's costing you to replace that person, retrain them, and get someone back up to speed. I don't care if it's 20,000 a year or 100,000 a year. It's a lot of money and it's a lot of waste.
Well, Rod,
it's a lot of heartache and it's a lot of bad publicity, right? There's nothing worse than the people who want to disparage the worst bosses in the community. And believe me, there's a lot of people who are willing to do it. So I don't know, Sam, I hope that might help a little bit, but you know, sometimes people need to be hit between the eyes with a 2x4 and the facts, even if they don't want to hear them. And I like Jim's thing. It's a drip campaign, a little bit slowly and slowly.
Rod, I've said it on this call before too. People don't quit the job. They quit the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the owner, the manager. And, you know, again, looking at the group of people on this call, you know, and I'm thinking about Sean Fuller there, you know, he's young and he's doing a great job in his career. One day Sean's going to have a group of people underneath him. And I hope that Sean looks back at these calls and remembers these essential soft skills, you know, that we're teaching now, because these are going to apply later when you build out your team. You know, they hardly ever do they quit. Like I love what Bruce said. It's not about the money. Sometimes it's about the relationship and what you build out of that. Right. And same thing goes for being an employee. It's not always about the money. That helps, but it's about the leadership and how they treat you and the environment that you create. All these essential skills we're talking about, you know, and again, I know a little bit of the backstory with Samantha. I hope that they will focus on some essential skills so that they can become better leaders, so that people stay, right? So good discussion.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's one of those things that a bad boss has a bad reputation. And you know, what's your reputation worth? You know, for those of you who are in business, those of you who are aspiring to be business people or go to that next level, what's your reputation worth? Because it's worth everything. And that's what we're telling you tonight. It is worth everything. And so you have to get it right. You have one opportunity to really get it right. And it's a slippery slope on the downhill slide, right? Going up, you fight for every inch of it. Going down, yeah, once you've crossed that line, it goes fast. So stay engaged.
Let me add this, Rod. Not only is it something that's important, but you have to nurture that reputation every day. One screw up can wipe out 1,000 attaboys in a heartbeat. So if you're tired, you're drunk, you're feeling like dog snot, it doesn't matter. You have to step up. Otherwise, the leadership, if you don't exhibit it, it's going to bite you in the butt.
Absolutely. And that's something else we've said. Yeah. No excuses. And what is it, Jim? Someone's always watching.
For sure. Yep. Good point.
All right. If there's nothing else, if somebody else has something else you want to weigh in, not just on this subject, anything else, feel free, raise your hand. And if not, we'll let you get back to your evening and we'll be back on with you next Monday night. Anybody going once, going twice? Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a pleasure. Catch us on Young Entrepreneur Syndicate every Monday, 6 o'clock. We will be here. Do your homework. Get back to us on this. What was your takeaway?
Thanks, Rod.
Thank you, Jim.